initial post-fight video recorded 5-10 seconds after the result was announced here. So I may do a second video tomorrow in more detail. I scored the fight 114 to 113 in favour of Arthur Abraham. I scored it 6 rounds each. I had Murray 4-0 up at one stage before Abraham started to come into the fight. And I had Abraham 6-5 up going into the last, and I edged that towards Murray. So I scored it 6 rounds each. The point deduction means I scored it just in favour of Arthur Abraham. Abraham's won by a split decision, 115, 112, 116 and 111. With the other judge going by choosing Murray by 3 rounds. So actually the point deduction didn't make a difference with regard to these 3 judges' scorecards, but it certainly did with myself. Just touching briefly on that point deduction, I actually don't think that was unwarranted. You know, I know we can talk about inconsistency. You know, when Klitschko was fighting Povetkin and holding all night, and it was, you know, we can talk about inconsistency, but for me, Murray was holding considerably. It was stopping the action, and I do think it's questionable whether holding is the right tactic to win a fight when you're going into the hometown of an established champion. Murray started the fight well, very, very active, using the jab, using lots of lateral movement, trying to throw flurries of punches. Arthur Abraham gave the early rounds away. I mean, it was like he wasn't even trying in the early round. His output was nearly nothing. He came into the fight in classic Arthur Abraham style, 5th round, 6th round. You know, he was coming on fairly strong. I scored him 3 on the bounce. I scored him the 5th, the 6th and the 7th. Abraham's really perfected the style he has, you know. Hands high, elbows in so he can block to the body. Very tight defence, you know, real tight defence. Martin Murray, to me, his tactics seem to be throw a load of volume. When Arthur Abraham decides to put on the pace, duck under the punch and hold. Now, for me, this was very obvious and predictable after the first few rounds. And I was actually surprised at the lack of adjustment from Arthur Abraham. You know, every single time Abraham would come in and throw a jab, you'd see Murray just duck under it and get real low. And Abraham did nothing to counter that. You know, you'd like to think that a fighter like Abraham could predict that very quickly and make an adjustment. Instead of Abraham throwing high, I'd have preferred it to see him dig to the chest or go into the body or lead with something, you know, to the ribs. I don't know why he continued sort of lead to the head with a jab. It made it Murray's tactic continually effective, and you know, it kind of made it, you know, exacerbated Arthur Abraham's inaccuracy, really. That tactic of getting low and bending really seemed to befuddle Arthur Abraham, which is something that surprised me. I thought he'd make more of an adjustment. Anyway, so we've fought the first 7 rounds. In the 8th round, Martin Murray does something that surprises me. He badly rocks Arthur Abraham. Arthur Abraham. You know, I consider Abraham to have one of the best chins out there, and I consider Martin Murray to be a very light puncher. So I was surprised at how heavily Abraham was rocked, and make no mistake, he was in a bad place. You know, Murray catches him over the top right hand, and Abraham is, you know, really wobbled. His legs are not very steady. He used some good veteran techniques to get through that, actually. He was holding onto the ropes, even when the referee was, you know, holding them apart. He bought himself an extra few seconds, and he looked to hold on at other points in that round. You know, even though it was a big round for Murray, Abraham did well to not do worse in that fight. Rounds 9 and 10, I scored to Arthur Abraham. I thought he was coming on strong. You know, he's blocking a lot of Murray's work. He was taking a lot of Murray's shots on his gloves or on his elbows when he was tucking in, and again landing the more eye-catching punches. And it kind of had that same dynamic at similar times to Paul's Smith fight, you know, where Smith was the volume puncher, but you were just feeling that Abraham's work was of the higher quality, if you like. Arthur Abraham, he kind of is so conservative and so economical with his punches that he's able to come on very strong into the fight. So he does this cool thing where he just stands in the corner, just takes it, and he kind of throws his hands down, just goes, like, almost wobbles his chest a bit, you know. And it's like, you know, he's so conservative that when he does decide to go in the later rounds, he can come on strong and he can, you know, look like the more eye-catching puncher against a guy like Martin Murray. So I did 5 rounds all. I scored Abraham the 11th, I think, in a 10-8 round. I gave Abraham the round anyway, quite strongly. And then Murray obviously got the point deducted, which we've already discussed. Going into the last, I scored it to Murray, could have gone either way. So 114, 113. I don't have a problem with the 115, 112 scorecard. I don't think Murray did quite enough to win here today. I was actually surprised at the size. You know, Murray looked like a genuinely big super middleweight. And another thing I'd say about Murray, credit to him, he raises his game for the big fights. Martin Murray is a guy who, to my eye, looks poor against an international opponent we haven't heard of on an undercard over 8 rounds. But in the big fights against Golovkin, against Arthur Abraham, he turns up the pace, he moves his game to the next level. So, you know, credit for him. I do question whether the technique of holding and ducking and holding is enough to win in Germany. You know, for me, he'd need to come up with a game plan that was more eye-catching and more offensively minded, rather than the sort of ducking and holding tactic he employed, which could well be perceived as negative. Sure, he did well in the first 3 to 4 rounds, and you know, he set up an early lead, but really, I do feel that Abraham was the better fighter in the night. Let me know your thoughts. As I said, I'm coming at this straight after the fight. I haven't had time to reflect on it. I haven't had time to review anything again. So may well do another video on it tomorrow and may discuss in further detail. Arthur Abraham, classic performance from him. Does what he does best. Martin Murray, he emerges with credit again, but it's now the 4th time unlucky. And you have to start to think, is he just coming up a little bit short at this top level? Thanks for watching. Please subscribe to the channel.